going to disconnect the battery first. Take the negative terminal off. Use a 10mm socket or wrench. Loosen up the nut and slide the terminal off and out of the way. Disconnect the connector right here. Slide that off. We're going to remove the hose from the throttle body. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. Loosen that clamp up. And grab the hose and slide it off the throttle body. And we'll just move the hose out of the way. Disconnect the connector for the throttle body. There's a little lock right here if you need a pocket screwdriver to push it back a little bit and then push down on the tab. Slide the connector off. Right here we're going to disconnect this hose. Just push on the tabs on the side. Slide that up. And then we can slide this solenoid out. Just like that. Disconnect the connector. Just push down on the tab. Slide it off. Then over here there's a clip. We can just slide the clip, the hose out of the clip, and then you can slide this aside. Now we'll disconnect this hose. Just push the buttons on the side, and then you can just pull it straight up. And the connector right here. Just get underneath the lock. Slide the connector up. And slide this out. Now disconnect this hose right here. There is a little clip in there. If you use a pick, just slide the clip back. You don't have to take it off completely unless you want to. And then grab the hose. You should be able to slide it up. There is a retainer right here as well. You can open that retainer up. Just wiggling the hose back and forth. And then pull it straight up. And we can slide that hose out of the way. Remove this cover, just grab underneath it and pull it straight up. Now we're going to disconnect the fuel injectors. Slide in there with a pick or a screwdriver and just push. There's a little metal tab. Just like that. You just want to push that down. As you push that down, that's the release. Then you can disconnect the connector. So do that for all four. These wires might be in your way. You can pull those out of the retainer. And just pull those all up. Now remove this wiring harness from the fuel rail. And just have that out of the way. There's a ground strap right here. You want to disconnect that from the fuel rail. Use a 10mm socket. Take this nut off. And remove that ground. Just slide that out of the way. Now we're going to use a T30 socket. Take these two screws out of the fuel rail. Now we're going to remove the fuel rail very carefully. Just grab the fuel rail back and forth. Try to slide it up, slide it towards the back of the vehicle while still going up at an angle, just like that. Now you can disconnect the whole fuel rail. There is still pressure in here. You would have to relieve the pressure, but it's just as easy to disconnect it and just set it aside. We can remove it from this retainer right here. Just use a pocket screwdriver and just pop this open. And then just set this aside. Then you don't have to deal with the fuel. There's a connector underneath. You want to disconnect that. It's a little bit tricky to reach. You're going to push down on the two tabs. If you have to, you can take the clip off. Just use a pick and pull it off. Slide that out of the way. It might be easier to take that connector off and disconnect that connector. Make sure you put that clip back on. And there's a hose and some wiring harnesses that are just clipped on to the manifold. You just want to take those off. There's a retainer right there. Just use a trim tool. All right, there you go. Now we're going to use an E10 socket and take the intake manifold bolts out. I'm going to start with the one that has the ground strap so I can get that out of the way. So the second tier in, that first bolt, take that out. Out. And then you can do the same with the other bolts. And just grab the manifold, rock it back and forth. And we can slide it up very carefully. Underneath there is a vacuum hose that you want to disconnect the vacuum hose. You really didn't have access to it before. You can disconnect it right here. Just use some needle nose pliers. Move that hose clamp up. Then just twist the vacuum hose back and forth. If you need to, you can use a pick from the back side of it. Just like this. Just to break the seal. And rotate it, pull that off. You can grab the intake. There is another wiring harness right here. Slide that out. It's also clipped in down below here. Again, I'll just use the needle nose pliers and squeeze the clip. And there it is. Now we're going to move this sensor over to the new one. Use a T30 socket. Remove this screw. Then grab the sensor, just gently give it a wiggle and tug up. Before you put the map sensor in, you want to put a new O-ring on. Just use a pick, take the old O-ring off. Just like that. Take the new O-ring. And just slide it on like that. You could take a little bit of engine oil and just put it on the O-ring, and then you can slide it in. Line it up and press it in. Put the screw back in. And snug down the bolt. If this rubber grommet stayed with the intake, you want to take this off, transfer that over. Or it may have stayed in the sensor, the solenoid in the car. That's fine. Now I'll move this clip over. You can just take some needle nose pliers and just squeeze the tab. Pop that off. That's all you're squeezing right there. That on the new one, just lock it down in place. Now we'll take the throttle body bolts off. Use a 5mm hex socket. And I'm going to loosen all these bolts up first and take them out. And slide the throttle body off. And just take a rag and wipe the backside. If you want, you can use a little brake parts cleaner. And slide this in position. Get the screws started. Now you want to torque those bolts to 71 inch-pounds. I'm just going to cross torque them just so it's tightened evenly. That's good. Now we're going to transfer this solenoid and vacuum hoses over to the new one. Just use a pick, just get underneath the vacuum hose over here. There is a little slot where you can get in there. Or just try to twist it a little bit. Pop that off right there. There's another one over here. Just get underneath with a screwdriver or a pick. Just a pocket screwdriver works good. Now it's clipped in right here, so you want to get under the solenoid and just squeeze these tabs and then push the center one back and just try to rock it up while you do that. Might need a trim tool or a screwdriver to pry up underneath. That slides up. And move it over to the new one. It's going to slide on right here. Just like that. And put that hose right there. Push that all the way on. And then this hose is going to go right next to it. Right there. I'm going to put this clip on before I put this back together. Just slide it back in place just like that. Now I'm going to replace the seals for the fuel injectors. Just wipe these down first, just with a rag. Get some of the dirt off. And I'm going to use a pick, just get underneath the seal. And slide it over. Take the new seal. And just slide it over. Just kind of want to roll it over, get it so it's settled, and then we'll do the same with the other ones. Now slide the intake back in position. And you want to secure the wiring harness. There's a little spot right there and right there. disconnect those. And we'll slide this vacuum line in place. It's going to go in the solenoid. You want to move that clamp down. Just use the needle nose pliers. While this is still up like this, I am going to plug that connector in. It's a little bit easier to get to. Line that up and lock it down. Now line the intake up. That's good. And get all the bolts started. And the last one, take that ground wire, get that one started. And snug those all down first. Then we're going to torque those to 15 foot-pounds. I'm just going to take a small amount of motor oil and just put it on the seals for the injectors and line the injectors up. Slide those in position. Make sure you get the fuel rail over here where that hold down is. And gently push the injectors in. might have to wiggle it just slightly. That's good. Take these two self-tapping screws, get those started. Using a 10mm socket, we'll tighten those down. Oops. And just snug those down. Not too tight, just snug. Put this ground wire on, and then the nut, get that started, and tighten that down. Now we can line all the connectors up for the injectors. And push those on. This wiring harness is going to get pushed onto the clips. Those are all clipped in, and then clip this wiring harness in over here, and right here, and right here. It goes like that. All right, how are we doing? And this hose is next. It's gonna line up in position here. If you took that clip completely off, you wanna put that back on. Otherwise, it normally sits like that. Push it all the way on. Lock it down. Push it back in the retainer. And the wiring harness is going to go through here. Reconnect the map sensor. Lock that in place. And the purge solenoid. Slide that in position. Reconnect it over here, lock it down, and then this other vacuum hose, lock that down. Gets locked in there. And any wires that look like they have to be clipped on, make sure you clip those in. Looks good. Reconnect the throttle body, lock that in place, lock it down. Take the intake hose, slide that in place. Make sure you get the worm clamp in a position where you can tighten it. And tighten down the worm clamp. Just snug, make sure the hose is tight, it's good. Line up the connector and lock it in place. Just slide this hose underneath the retainer and lock that down. Line this connector up and plug in the purge solenoid. lock it down. Take the cover, line it up, lock it down. Now connect the battery and snug down the terminal. Give it a wiggle, make sure it's tight.